of impersonalism where someone may come and say, "Hey, actually, I'm God, but I've forgotten," right? Like there's this path or this branch of impersonalism where people think that they are part of the whole. They all are that one. They're God, but they have forgotten over time, right? And so Prabhupada is saying if you have forgotten over a period of time, that means you have the influence of Maya. You're under the influence of Maya. And if the if you can be under the influence of Maya, then who is higher, Maya or God, right? And if Maya is supreme, then there's like then it kind of defeats the purpose of or defeats the argument of supremacy of God, right? So you can see kind of how the um, whole argument doesn't make sense, right? So it's good tool to have in one's Swiss knife if someone comes through that discussion, right? You can kind of ask like, hey, if one is under forgotten that one is God, then like looks like the Maya is supreme, and then that's just kind of defeating the argument of that God is the supreme. Um, so that's why it's really important to have the spiritual master guide us. So there, we hear about the four varnas, right? The Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, right? And so in the previous ages, you were born in certain varnas, and there were really um, training paths or schools that kind of trained you in those varnas to be able to then progress through how to serve the Lord in, through that varna, right? It was kind of really clear. So like in case of Kshatriyas, like we hear when Pandavas they are at a certain age, they go through this school of fighting and becoming a warrior, right, under the guidance of Dronacharya, right? So it was in the previous ages, the Warners you were born in, there was a path to really kind of get you, help you build those qualities to serve the Lord in those propensities, right? But in Kali Yuga, it's the Varnas are not that clear, and it's we all have different tendencies. Like one may have a tendency to learn and kind of educate other, which is like a Brahmin tendency. But then someone may also have tendency of service. That's a Shudra tendency. Or someone may have a tendency to being an entrepreneur, starting something, right? That's kind of a Vaishya tendency. So then how do you really understand like in um, which tendency do you tend to cultivate and in which way you can actually use that to build your relationship with Krishna, which is kind of the ultimate purpose of being in the human form, right? And that's really where the guidance and um, the need and the importance of a spiritual master comes in. Um, and we see this in case of Arjuna too, right? Like after the Bhagavad Gita is spoken to him, he's told or he knows that he has to fight this battle, but it's not easy for him, right? Even through the process, even through knowing it, while he's fighting the battle, there are days when he's not able to fight because he has Bhishma in front of him, and he's like, "How can I fight this battle?" Right? And so Krishna has to really kind of like pick up the chariot wheel and charge to really get him back motivated, right? And that's the role of the spiritual master, right? We go through all of these different ups and downs in our life and not really understanding which varnas or which ashrams we follow in and how do we really um, um, follow that, not only follow that, but like be an example in those different varnas and these ashrams to inspire others, right? And the spiritual master really helps in those ways to be able to focus and remember Krishna and serve Krishna, no matter in which ashrams or which varnas we may be in. Um, so I wanted to kind of end by sharing this story. Um, I don't know if it's a folk story or it's in the scriptures. Maybe if one of you have heard it, you can confirm it. Um, but one time, Narad Muni, um, he asks Lord Vishnu that who is the biggest devotee of all. Um, okay. Okay. Um, who is the biggest devotee of all? And actually, thinking that Lord Vishnu will say it's Narad Muni because he's actually spreading the glories of the Lord everywhere he goes, right? He's chanting his names throughout the universe, so it must be him. And Lord Vishnu replies, actually, it's this cobbler in this specific town who is actually my biggest devotee. And so Narad Muni is taken aback a little bit. It's like, how's that possible? Here I am like chanting Lord's name and spreading his glory. How's that possible that, this small cobbler in this little town is the biggest devotee? So he's a little perplexed by that. So Lord Vishnu says, why don't we do this? We do like uh, a competition where we take a pot of water and we put a pot of water on the cobbler's head, and then the cobbler has to walk a certain amount of distance, and then do the same thing with you, where we put a pot of water on your head and you have to go around a certain distance, and whoever spills the least amount of water is my biggest devotee. So Narad Muni says, okay, that makes sense. We can do that. So um, the cobbler goes and puts a pot of water on his head. He's walking, and then Narad Muni does the same thing, and then Muni was so focused because he wanted to make sure that like he wants to be that the topmost devotee of the Lord, that he hasn't spilled any water. So he's just focusing on balancing and making sure the water is dropped. And so when we look at the pot, there's no water dropped, just like perfectly done. And so so he's really happy that he's able to do it. So then Lord Vishnu asks him, when you were actually taking the pot of water, were you thinking about me? And Narad Muni responds like, how is that possible? I was just, so absorbed making sure that the water doesn't spill. I wanted to make sure that happens. So no, I couldn't think of you, my Lord. It's like, well, were you chanting and spreading my glory? Were you, it's like, well, my Lord, how is that possible? It's like I'm so focused in making sure that the water doesn't spill. So he's like, actually, the cobbler doing that act was still thinking about me and was still remembering me. And that's what he does, day in and day out. When he's doing his service of making these shoes, he's thinking of me and he's remembering me, you know. And that's the essence, and that's most important is, and that's what the spiritual master helps us and guide us, is to make sure no matter what varnas or what ashram we may be in, first of all, helping us to choose the different ashrams, and then helping us to understand what varna we fit in, and then making sure that we are able to serve the Lord and remember the Lord in those different varnas and different ashrams. So, any questions or comments, Prabhu? Please.
Just a quick comment. I was premature. It wasn't Brihat Bhagavatamrita.
Okay.
That's another story.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought you may be thinking of the gopis as well.
But it is a wonderful illustration of the fact that, when we're focusing on the mere externals, we can miss the point, you know, and that even the point of the externals is to help us to constantly remember Krishna and never forget him. And with that, you really do need the help of the spiritual master, Shushigoni Taikijai. You need the help of the spiritual master because there are so many things that we have in our consciousness, our conditioning that we don't necessarily see are obstructing our ability to constantly remember him.
Yeah.
And so to have someone who can actually help you say, uh, it could be a subtle desire to enjoy the material energy, or it's some type of subtle pride that one may have that they can't see on their own. So it's important to get to know someone that can give you.
Anyone else?
That exactly, but doing something like being the biggest devotee. Why would be the biggest devotee if they were to carry something without spilling anything?
Yeah, the hope to just show that in the external, it's easy, as Prabhu was sharing, it's easy to get occupied in details and forget the essence, right? So the point of was, hey, like the the whole external of carrying the pot and not spilling water is not important. The important is actually to remember Krishna. And so the Lord wanted to kind of communicate that point through that exercise. Does that make sense?
I was saying, like, what if they tried their best, but like, what if they like spill?
We will make mistakes, right? Like we are imperfect. Um, and as long as our two things, as long as um, we're being honest, and we're not kind of we're sincere and honest, and we're really trying to do it right and serve the devotees and serve Krishna. Those we can learn from those mistakes, right? And we can be guided by the spiritual master on how to kind of learn our lessons from those mistakes, and then how to like improve going forward, right? So the mistakes are part of the course, right? It's not that it's not going to happen. But then one, like not being discouraged by that to continue the process, right? Um, and then two, but also kind of learn and improve.
That story reminded me of this one devotee one time told me that Prabhupada named ISKCON the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, not for Krishna activities. They were making is that, yeah, we could be on the altar or we could be doing our service, but if we're thinking about something else instead of having like a consciousness of Krishna during it, it's gonna have benefit, but not as much benefit as if we were doing maybe anything outside, like fixing shoes or whatever, and being absorbed in thoughts of Krishna.
Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, I heard another story about not judging by the exterior, but the other side. I don't know exactly who the personality is were, but I know it was this. I think he was very rich person, very rich, like king or something. And then devotee came to see him, and the first like judgment was like, oh, how exalted can he really be? And I don't know if you know the characters in this, but how exalted can he really be? He's so rich, he's probably so like materially minded. But then as soon as this rich person just heard anything from the Bhagavatam, he just fell on the floor like crying in ecstasy. Like, you know who it was?
Pundarik Vidyanidhi.
And Gadadhar Pandit, and then yeah, and then Gadadhar Pandit took him as a spiritual master after that. So again, we shouldn't judge by the exterior. And I have a personal anecdote similar to that too. And in the Toronto area, one time I went to this devotee's home and I didn't know what to expect. But I realized it was a gigantic mansion. It's like enormous house. And my first reaction was like that too. It was just like, oh, okay, like how much of a devotee can he really be? But then he just preached to us like for hours and it was like super and I was just like, okay, no, he's a very elevated soul. So yeah. And he was using it, he was doing cow protection and he was doing these big programs and using it all in Krishna service. So it's good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other? Yes, Lord.
Hare Krishna. I had an experience when I first came to Krishna consciousness. It was a little later in life, so I would constantly be thinking, "Oh, what am I going to do when I get out of here? How's my life going to be?" So on and so forth. And I was engaged in service, but my mind was somewhere else. But once I situated myself working and pushing toward uh, a dream scenario, keeping Krishna in mind, like my activities were more blissful. So I was like on the outside, just desiring to be here all the time compared to being inside thinking about like, oh, I should be doing this, and that. And I found a lot more success just being honest with myself. I'm like, this is just, it would have been lovely if I came here when I was 18 and I took saffron and all these things, but I just had to be like brutally honest with who I am, what I need, and how to utilize that in service. So I like that story a lot. It's just the farmer maybe or the cobbler had a lot of stuff going on, but he was fixing shoes for devotees' feet, so he.
Yes, bro. Oh, so I thought anyone else?
How Prabhupada said Varnashram is 50% of the mission, but like nobody really knows how to farm. Any devotee. I don't know a single devotee who really knows how to farm and do it right in America. So how do you reconcile that, just that instruction and just being in your own situation, remembering Krishna?
If no one knows, how do you think I would know? um, when I was preparing, uh, I was focused on Varnashram, and so when I was reading the verse, I was like, I'll actually stay away from that a little bit this time because it's such a deep um, and vast topic. I mean, it can be taken from so many different lenses, I think. You can kind of focus from so many different angles. I think the way I see it is I think what Prabhupada was trying to do is cultivate or bring an environment that will be really suitable for practicing Krishna consciousness, right? And he was seeing that earlier, in the earlier years, like most of them in the young age were easy to just were easy in the younger ages, right? Like 18s, early 20s, kind of moving into these temples and and, as these devotees were getting older, they were getting married, they were starting the family life, the temple environment wasn't so um, it wasn't easy for them to kind of practice Krishna consciousness in that environment and raise kids, right? It was kind of so to be able to do that, that's where the Varnashram, the having the like having farm community would be a nice way to give those devotees an environment where they can be in an environment that has mode of goodness, and then serve Krishna in that way, right? So it if the externals are helping us, right, it's easy to kind of get the internals, right? That's like if you're, I don't know, I'm sure some of you may have experiences like when you're staying here at Krishna House, do the morning program versus, if you go home for a weekend or if you're away, then, trying to wake up and then kind of doing it by yourself, right? So in that way, the externals help us to be able to focus and do that, right? And I think that's what was the Prabhupada's mission of Varnashram, was to be able to create these external environment that would be helpful for these grihastha families, to be able to have the environment where they can raise Krishna conscious kids and then kind of grow in their Krishna consciousness because of the externals, and that will kind of help them, right? But it's not, as we have seen from kind of our trying that, it's not an easy thing to do. There are some farms throughout the world, there are some communities as they have been able to do that and are successful, which is great. And I think, we shouldn't discount on that fact, and we should try to do it. But at the same time, if it's not possible, then I think whatever can be the next best to be able to manifest that, right? Which can be devotees, living nearby and doing home programs, having like making sure that the kids are kind of spending time together, or the kids are going to a school that will provide spiritual education, right? So whatever can be kind of the if the if you cannot be in that one form, whatever you can do to kind of get to that physical proximity, or however you can kind of get that association for yourself and your kids in that priyasa ashram, um, whatever way you can do that, that would be kind of the next best option, and whatever you can make that possible. But I think the whole purpose is to be able to make sure that there is environment for that second stage, from going from brahmachari to or brahmacharini to that grihastha life, that you have the externals where you can easily practice Krishna consciousness and can kind of follow that. And then if that environment doesn't exist, then you try to make that environment in whatever way you can. Yes, Guru.
Very much for the class. On the point of earlier, I heard from, in regards to pots and the attempts to do the perfect service. I heard some time back from Kalakanta Prabhu, he said, don't, how does he put it? Don't let the perfection be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
You probably heard that before. So, yeah, we get caught up in these externals. But, yeah, the main thing is, what is it? Always remember Krishna, never forget anybody. And on this point of Varnashram is, I wouldn't say, I think there are devotees who know how to work the land and they're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are those who know how to do it and somehow right now they're not doing it.
Mm.
And the reason is because, we live in a society that's like so disconnected with the nature, and, we are caught up, we are caught up with a handheld device to order our food, to pay our bills. Everything is disconnected and, in a sense, desensitized of the importance of being in nature. But if there's a need, I think devotees will. Those who don't know, they will be forced to do it, and those who know, they will be giving opportunity to do it and also to train others. But I think it will be a very interesting experience, because I've seen firsthand, like a lot of, like living in Gitanagara, a lot of devotees will come and self-sufficiency, working the land, but it's on there's this, it's on a very artificial level. Like there's this romantic idea, okay, we're gonna do that, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. It's so much harder than the way we live today. But it's also very wonderful when it's done for Krishna.
Yeah. Yeah, I think on the first point, I just wanted to, I don't know if like some of the pundits here like know the words from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says like just like how the fire, there is always smoke with the fire, there'll be imperfection kind of in our service, right? So not to kind of, as you said, that not perfect be the enemy of good. So that's kind of a verse I kind of tend to meditate on when I'm trying to do my service. Um, Thinking, this perfect thing that I want to do. Then the second thing, yes, it's not. I think that the the problem is the self doing living in kind of a self-sufficient way is romanticized a little bit, and when you actually start doing it, you realize how hard work it is, and so if it's not your nature, then you tend to um, go away from it, or you tend to not do it. And I think that's been my realization lately too, is that there's always a need to do service. There are always certain needs. There will always be certain gaps that are there. And as devotees, it's important for us to make sure that we're kind of filling that gap until a person who really has that tendency can step in. But we can only do that temporarily, because if we do it for a long time, it's not going to sustain us and our spiritual life. And that's where the point of having the guidance of spiritual master is really important, because to continue growing in our spiritual life, it's really important that we are practicing or doing it in a way that fulfill our tendencies. Because I have seen this in so many examples. If it's being done in way where it's not our tendency, it can create like where you either get some kind of anger, or you step away, or you're unhappy, or you're still doing it but you're unhappy. And um then the thought comes in, well, when I first joined this devotional life, everything was so blissful and happy, and I was supposed to stay this way. Then why is it not working anymore, right? It's because, again, like we have certain tendencies, and if we try to do something that's not in that tendency for a long period of time, then that will create tensions and unhappiness. So again, that's the beauty of the system, of having a spiritual master who can help us and guide us to make sure we're kind of doing things towards our tendency, right? And unfortunately, um, being trying to grow something and being working with the land is not my tendency. So it happened like the other yesterday. I was driving through 441, and there's that big farm plot area, and they grow like so many things, and it was grown, and Amrita Kelly saw it, and there was like plastic on those, like the row beds where they are raising it, and there's plastic on it. And um and so I was like, I bet it's probably still organic, because it's not a fertilizer thing, or whatever. So I was like, probably the standards of organic are still not high enough. Again, I mean, I didn't do any research or whatever, but I know compared to other countries, like in US, the standards of organic, quote unquote, are lower than some countries in Europe. And so I was like, well, it would be nice, if we had some way to have our own farms and we could sustain it. So, we're not really serving the devotees and serving the Lord like this plastic green thing, whatever that was. And so, I kind of prayed and was like, Krishna, I don't have any tendencies, but maybe, sometime in my life I can do that. So always remember, like, I think even if we don't have those tendencies, to pray to Krishna to help us. And maybe one day we can we can do that when the opportunity comes, and Krishna can kind of help us to maybe use our tendencies in a way that will help a project or a bigger need in that sense. Okay.
It, to tie it together in the beginning, it seemed like um, specialized cells of the body, or to perform certain tasks, like your nerve cells perform nerve cell duties, And if you take another cell and put it in that part of the body, your body will reject it, unless it's a stem cell. Like there's always an exception. But it's like, yeah, just knowing your place and like doing your thing, then you click right into the flow. Like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then you just enjoy your service. Thank you for class.
Thank you. Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnavi Kanchana Krishna and